in the middle of October to my boyfriend, 19M. We're planning on a smaller scale wedding with mostly just friends and family, and considering that we both have large extended families, it was definitely a challenge planning for that many people. For a general idea of how big my family is, just my mom has 7 siblings who all have children of their own. With our small budget, I was looking at redesigning or upcycling a wedding gown instead of having to devote a huge amount of money towards a brand new dress. I mentioned my plans to a couple people and was in the process of looking at options when my mom's oldest sister's daughter, my cousin, reached out to me. Megan, 40F, got married in 2015. The marriage didn't last very long and they got divorced soon after. I barely remember the husband, as he never came to family gatherings and Megan and my mom aren't particularly close, so I was surprised she was offering something so important after a long time of distance. Regardless, Megan had offered to give me her wedding dress, as it was my size and she knew we were trying to avoid spending a crazy amount on a small budget. I loved the idea and the dress was beautiful. I did make sure she was comfortable giving it to me rather than loaning it, and she assured me that it held no emotional significance and she couldn't care less if she didn't have to hang on to it. I thanked her and took home the dress. One thing about me, however, is that I am a very chaotic seamstress, and I make the majority of my own clothes. And while I did love the original dress, I wanted to make some small changes to the hem and neckline to fit the theme better. The original dress was super full skirted with a long hem, and since my wedding is outside, I wanted to make sure it wouldn't be dragging in the dirt. So I took some layers off the underside, removed the trim and removed the sleeves to tighten the bodice. I was so happy with how it turned out, and my mom and friends agreed that it was perfect. Here's when the trouble started. My mom had taken a picture of me trying on the dress and decided to send Megan a picture alongside another thank you. However, she responded with a cold comment over text and called me later that night. She said that I should have asked her permission before ruining her dress, and that if I had thought it was so ugly before I should have bought my own. I tried to explain that the changes I made were small, and that I did ask before I took it if she wanted it back afterwards. She blew up at me saying that it was too different, and that she could never wear it again, even though she never gave the impression that she wanted to. Megan has already started before that she has no interest in getting remarried ever. I asked what she wanted me to do and she snapped at me that it was too late. She hung up and has apparently been telling people I slutted out her wedding dress and made sure I would embarrass her by outdoing the original dress. I don't know what to do about it. The wedding is way too close to consider making myself a dress, and I have my heart set on having something unique and personal for my wedding. Her mother called both me and my mom saying I should have asked, that I'm a spoiled brat for taking advantage of Megan's kindness and generosity. My parents and a few family members who I've told think I should uninvite Megan and just wear the dress, but my aunt is saying I would break Megan's heart unless I find something else. Should I give up on my dress and see what else there is? To provide some context and answer some questions, Megan and I are not super close, from both the age gap and different lifestyles. Megan is the 3rd cousin out of 21. I am the 9th. Megan, being the first girl child in the family, grew up with a lot of expectations and pressure, and ended up marrying a very religious and controlling husband. After her divorce, Megan went through what can best be described as a breakthrough and re-evaluation of her life and ambitions. Since then, she has completely changed her job, appearance, and opinions. She is no longer an active member in family events and only takes part in important ones like birthdays, funerals, and weddings. Despite this, we have never had any problems between us and our interactions have always been civil and kind. Secondly, the alterations I did were only limited to the skirt and bodice. The slutted out comment apparently stemmed from my removal of the sleeves, turning it to a sleeveless top, and raising the hem to a T-length. My ankles are exposed now. Someone had pointed out to me that Megan's anger was a product of her own self-esteem, as she has naturally grown and gained weight since then, which I could definitely see even though she is still beautiful. And thirdly, I am definitely planning on regular updates if any more incidents happen up to the wedding, and a full breakdown with photos after the ceremony. Thank you to everyone for their kind messages and loving support. You've all made me feel so much better and I appreciate you taking the time to comment. Update. As of yesterday, I found out from my fiancé that Megan had reached out to him with false concern about how my home-styled dress gave the wrong idea about our wedding and had the audacity to ask him, the man I've been in love with for nearly 3 years, if he was sure he wanted to marry a woman who wouldn't put in the effort of getting a proper dress. She says this as if I hadn't spent weeks sewing the dress to make sure it was perfect. Thank goodness my fiancé wasn't upset by her attitude and responded that I had put way more effort into the dress than she put into her marriage, and that shut her up real fast. She turned around and apparently has been crying to my elderly grandparents, her mother, some of the other cousins etc. that I'm a trashy whore with a cheap shotgun wedding. I'm not even pregnant LMAO, with a fiancé who is only interested in our family's money. My fiancé is a mechanic, and regardless of the fact that he is doing really well and makes a pretty good salary, she still seems to think he's beneath her. Some of my older cousins, the ones I don't talk to as much, have actually expressed concern about whether or not they want to go to the ceremony at all. I blame my aunt for spreading misinformation, which I managed to assure them wasn't true. After all of this, I reached out to Megan saying that because of all her comments and insults she is no longer invited to the wedding. I admitted that I was sorry for the situation, but I can't keep pardoning her rude comments on what is supposed to be a happy time in my life. She snapped that she wouldn't show her face at my pathetic excuse for a wedding, and that she can't wait to see how I act when he leaves me. Overall, I am pretty confident that Megan and I's relationship might not recover, but at this point I don't regret anything. Here's hoping everything else cools down in the next couple weeks and I can go into our day with no negativity at all. Am I the asshole for altering my cousin's hand-me-down wedding dress after she told me I could have it? Top comments. Commenter 1, wear the dress, invite the cousin. Use the pieces of the dress to make a decorative pillow for your rings and present it to her at the reception as the best cousin ever for gifting you the dress. It will be a public moment and you will never hear about it again. Commenter 2, totally NTA. Your mom blew it by taking photos and posting. That was unfortunate. Issue 1. Issue 2, do you have that text or email agreement, paper trail, of her IDC about the dress convo that you can refer back to? Sorry that you're going through this. This isn't something any soon-to-be bride needs to deal with. Truly, sounds like she was more emotionally connected to that dress than she thought. There's nothing you can do at this point other than add a note of appreciation of her selfless offering of the dress. Don't uninvite her, just make sure one of your MOH are watching her on your day. Commenter 3, NTA. If your cousin didn't want it changed, she should have said, don't make any alterations. It sounds like you made some sensible changes, don't let her ruin your day. Commenter 4. Your cousin specifically told you that she was giving you the dress and she didn't want it back. So now you are the owner of the dress. You can make any changes you want to it. She can't come back later and attach conditions to the gift. It's your dress, OP. You should wear it. Let aunt and cousin know that you will be wearing the dress and they are welcome to attend, but you understand if that's too much for them. Update. Hi everyone. I made a post on this subreddit a few months ago about my 18F wedding dress and all the surrounding drama that came from it. I had been given my 40F cousin's old wedding dress from a failed marriage and altered it to better fit the needs of my ceremony and my style. She did not appreciate the changes and became very rude and hurtful. My wedding was 6 days ago and I was asked to do an update, and I am happy to share how it all went down. I am still so happy how my dress turned out, and was very glad to have shortened the train, as there had been rain the night before and morning dew on the grass. The shorter hemline saved me a lot of mess and damage in the long run. Plus, I felt beautiful and it made such a special day all the more amazing. I had told my cousin, Megan, that her behavior was rude and unnecessary and that I did not want her bringing her unpleasantness to my day. However, her mother, who had been one of her primary supporters, had apologized in order to go to the ceremony. So while Megan herself was not actually at the wedding, I had not completely excluded the issue. Megan's mother, 71F my aunt, is your basic senior white woman, and usually expresses her opinions in a loud and unspoken manner, so I was uneasy in the beginning when she arrived. She didn't make a fuss throughout the ceremony though, and everything went smoothly. I sneezed while walking down the aisle, but that wasn't anyone's fault in particular. The reception was at an outdoor garden where we had set up under a gazebo with a temporary floor for tables and eventually dancing, with a slightly elevated platform for the big table and speeches. This is where my aunt decided to make sure everyone knew about her daughter's dress. After a few speeches, following my friend's champagne rendition of that time we went camping and the tent slid down a hill, she made her way up to the podium. She started her speech in the usual, unassuming way, congratulating us and remarking on how far we've come as people. Unfortunately, she decided to tie this statement into a comment of, "You've even made your own dress." I mean, not really, actually, it was Megan's first. She then went on into how she remembered shopping for the dress with Megan for her own wedding, and going on and on about how it was perfect and made for her. At this point in the speech I was just staring at her in confusion, while my husband and everyone else just sat there awkwardly waiting for her to be done. She finished her speech with a half-assed backtrack to me looking lovely and wishing us good luck on our marriage. She mumbled back to her seat and let the ceremony keep going, looking entirely too proud of herself. Other than that, the only other trouble she caused was her apparently showing everyone she could manage a photo of the original, which is really not that bad in the grand scheme of things. I am so happy that my family and friends were able to be there and celebrate with us, and can't wait to see what comes for us next. Thank you again to everyone who commented and reassured me in the beginning. You've all been so kind. Who knows, I might even dye the dress another color and keep it around just in case an appropriate event comes up. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. When you got the dress, did you get permission to alter it? Perhaps there might have been an expectation for it to go back to her when you were done with it. OOP, I did. I mentioned in my original post that I had asked specifically if it was mine to keep and she agreed. That was a big worry of mine in the first place, but she told me she had no attachments to it. Commenter 2, you should reach out to your aunt and thank her for making a speech showing her support of you and your marriage. You got so many compliments on the work you did to the dress after she pointed out that you did all that yourself. Everyone was super impressed by the before and after pictures, so you wanted to give her a personal thank you. I think that they would have made comments about it being cousin's dress, and shown pictures, if you didn't make adjustments. So I think you picked the better path. Commenter 3, once someone gives you something, it is yours to do with as you wish. If she didn't want you to alter it in any way, she should have put that condition on the give. Then that way you could have refused it since it wasn't as you imagined your dress to be. You weren't wrong, and your aunt and cousin need to suck it up and never mention it again. Am I the asshole for cutting ties with my family after years of being overshadowed by my disabled sister's needs and feeling invisible? Emily, my younger sister, has always been the center of my family's existence. Even though she is a year younger than me, it has always seemed to me like she lives in a completely different universe that is solely centered on her. Because Emily was born with a physical disability and ongoing health problems, her life was filled with doctor's appointments, treatments, and special accommodations. Naturally, my parents devoted nearly all of their time and energy to making her life as easy and happy as possible, and I could see why. Nevertheless, it also meant that I was abandoned at a very young age. I took on the role of the easy and healthy kid, which came with the expectation that I needed less care and upkeep. I learned early on not to worry about it because Emily's needs always came first. I would nearly always stay behind when Emily couldn't, either at Aunt Linda's or with a neighbor, depending on Emily's ability to cope. They would frequently say, "We will bring you next time." But I never felt like it would happen. I didn't simply miss the big family holidays. Emily was almost always at the center of even the small everyday activities, like going to the park, buying ice cream, or watching a movie with the family. Sometimes I could comprehend it logically, but it still hurts emotionally. Her needs always came first, even though I would be excited about the idea of us all doing something together. I felt unnoticeable. The first time I truly felt the weight of being forgotten was on one of my birthdays. I must have been 8 or 9 years old by then. There was no cake, no celebration, and no acknowledgement of the day. I woke up that morning with the thought that maybe, just possibly, something unexpected was in store for me. However, as the day went on, it became very evident that my parents had completely forgotten my birthday. Their main goal was to get Emily to a concert that she had been anticipating for several months. They talked enthusiastically about the performance when they got home. As I listened, I questioned if they were even aware that it was supposed to be my special day. It wasn't until the next morning that my mother realized her error. Even while I appreciated the gift card she hurriedly grabbed as an afterthought, it was painfully obvious that the excitement of Emily's concert far outweighed my birthday in their universe. For many years, this pattern persisted. My parents were constantly focusing on Emily, and I was expected to accept that. Being understanding at all times, avoiding conflict, and blending in while everyone else's needs were taken care of was a heavy burden for a young youngster. I felt more noticed and appreciated whether I was by myself or at friends' houses, so I started spending more time there. A year ago was my 10th birthday. For weeks, I had been hinting that I wanted to do something fun. Like go to the arcade or throw a pizza party. It was significant to me because I was finally getting close to double digits. As my birthday drew near, however, it became very evident that nothing was scheduled. I wanted them to surprise me, but I forced myself not to get excited. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. On the morning of my birthday, however, there was no celebration. There was no mention of it during breakfast, and the day went by like any other. Emily was the center of attention because she had been having a rough week with her health. Even though I knew she required more attention, I still felt disappointed. My school friends recalled, wished me a happy birthday, and even collected some money to buy me ice cream for lunch. It was a small thing, but it made the day seem less empty. I thought maybe my folks would remember when I got home that afternoon. However, the house was silent, and my mother was on the phone setting up Emily's next therapy session. My father was still working. It should come as no surprise that no one acknowledged that today was supposed to be mine. Trying to make the most of it, I went to my room. What is the point of saying anything? It wouldn't make people remember, and it certainly wouldn't make them feel sorry. The following day my mother finally realized she had missed my birthday again. She apologized and explained how busy she had been with Emily. As usual, I nodded and claimed it was all right, but it wasn't. Even though I knew in my heart how things would work out, they assured me that we would make up for it that weekend. I desired to have faith in them. We stayed at home during the weekend though, because Emily wasn't feeling well enough to go out. Rather than celebrating or doing something special for Emily, we watched her favorite movies. As an afterthought, my dad brought home a store-bought cake, but by that point, it felt more like a consolation prize than a celebration. It served as yet another sobering reminder that in my home, Emily's needs and desires always came first. I had given up on having many dreams by the time I turned 12. I didn't focus on making any requests or offering any agenda suggestions. I spent the entire day playing video games, doing my homework, and helping out around the house. That year, my parents did remember to wish me a happy birthday, but there was a brief acknowledgement before everything was back to normal. That day, Emily went to see another doctor, and she was the center of attention again. That birthday hurt the most. Even though it wasn't particularly awful, not because of anything noteworthy, but rather because of how typical everything was. Habitual neglect as opposed to malicious neglect. My needs barely registered since my parents were so accustomed to giving Emily all of their attention. They neglected not just my birthdays but also my accomplishments in school, my hobbies, and the things I held dear. The acknowledgement was swiftly followed by dismissal. Resignation hardened by the disappointment. I stopped expecting something different as I grew older and realized that this was just the way things were. Celebrations of friends' birthdays began to act as a reminder of what might occur. At home, however, the story was consistently the same. As the years went by, I became accustomed to my invisibility. My parents constantly seemed to be somewhere else, so I learned to have modest expectations. It wasn't like they didn't care about me in their own way. Even though Emily's requests were always more urgent, more immediate, and somehow more important, I started to emotionally distance myself, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. It was easier to be satisfied with coming in second, third, or not at all, and it was easier to not expect anything. During all of this, my grandparents were my lifeline. They were the ones that noticed the small details about me and gave me a sense of importance. Every time I went to their house, I had the impression that I had entered a different realm where I could see myself. Making everything unique was something my grandmother was particularly skilled at. Each time I went to see her, she let me pick out something to bake. No matter what we made, cookies, cupcakes, or even simple spaghetti, she had an old recipe book that was worn and battered. Her kitchen was our thing. My childhood was filled with joy on such afternoons. She made sure I understood that I was more than just another kid, I was her grandson. Grandpa, however, was the reserved type. Although he didn't say much, he was trustworthy and always present. He loved model trains. His basement was crammed with tracks, little houses and miniature scenery. I loved how he included me in something he enjoyed, not because I was a rail enthusiast. It was the only area where I didn't feel like an afterthought, and I spent hours down there with him. My grandparents complimented me on every small achievement I made that my parents didn't notice. After I scored my first soccer goal, Grandma prepared a special dinner and baked a cake. Grandpa even put the ball I used in the game in a small display in the living room. They made it feel like a huge deal in their place. Even though it was just a local soccer match, it was important to them because it was important to me. However, such pleasant things are always taken away by life. It was 3 years ago that Grandma fell unwell. It was a long fall, reflecting the slow erosion of my childhood happiness. It wasn't abrupt. She continued to attempt baking with me at first, but as her condition worsened, our sessions shifted to my sitting next to her bed and holding her hand as she slept. Long before she was gone, I missed her. Her death truly broke my heart. It felt like losing everything when I lost the one person who gave me a sense of belonging. The funeral went very quickly. There were many faces expressing sorrow, but it didn't feel genuine. Although Grandma was no longer with me, it felt more like a piece of me had. After that, Grandpa changed. His once warm eyes became aloof. Our visits decreased, and he stopped hanging around with his trains. What had been my sanctuary felt chilly and empty now. Because the house was too full of memories, Grandpa eventually went into a nursing home in a different city. I could understand why it was sold, but it still felt like another aspect of my youth had been lost. It wasn't the same when we went to see him once a month. The antiseptic visitor's room lacked the coziness that had previously made our time together memorable, and our visits were short. We were both unable to mend the raw wound caused by Grandma's absence. The barrier against the loneliness I experienced at home disappeared after Grandma left and Grandpa moved far away. Everything became controlled by Emily's needs, and life resumed as it had always been. The contrast, however, was suddenly even more noticeable. My grandparents made me visible where my parents had unintentionally rendered me invisible. It was absorbed by every family decision, every discussion, and every medical procedure Emily had. My words appeared to disappear as soon as they left my lips when I tried to discuss friends or school. They didn't appear to be picked up. I became more reclusive at home, and I typically declined friends' invitations to hang out at the university. It was easier to avoid queries about why I felt the need to pretend everything was all right or why I was always so miserable. Everyone was aware of Emily, of course, but nobody had any real idea what it was like to live in her shadow. Since Emily did not select her health problems, I felt ashamed, but that did not make the actual suffering of neglect any less genuine. Specifically, the guilt was awful. I felt terrible because I wanted more attention. And I was upset that Emily was constantly given priority. Feeling important was more important than merely getting attention. Despite my parents' best efforts, I still felt like I was peering in from the outside. At this point, I brought up family therapy for the first time, but I had no idea what to anticipate. I thought I'd give it a shot. My parents consented, much to my surprise. Maybe they thought a professional could assist close the growing distance between us, or maybe they didn't know what else to do. In any case, we were seated in a calm office with a therapist who appeared sincere in wanting to hear from each of us. We started going to therapy sessions on a regular basis. I was a little optimistic at first that things might get better. I was able to finally communicate what I had been experiencing for a long time early on in those sessions. I expressed my desire for them to take notice of my hobbies and recognize my achievements, as well as how it felt to be the one neglected. It had been a while since I felt as though my parents were actually paying attention or that they recognized the profound impact their deeds, or lack thereof, had on me. They appeared taken aback, possibly even shocked. Tears, apologies, and vows to improve were exchanged. For a few moments we appeared to be moving forward. My parents paid closer attention and were more considerate. They found time for me alone, for things that weren't Emily's purview. We went bowling, saw a movie, and visited a museum. Even though it was unpleasant at first, it felt great to be the center of attention for a brief while. But Emily was aware of the shift. Since she wasn't used to sharing the limelight, her jealousy quickly surfaced. Small remarks like how much fun we must have had without her or how wonderful it was for her to have some alone time at home were the first subtleties. However, those comments quickly became more. She sobbed throughout dinner one night, saying my parents were favoring me and ignoring her. According to her, the reason they loved me more was because I was normal. My parents were shocked by the accusation and hurried to console her. We started to lose the delicate equilibrium we had been establishing. We stopped going on family vacations as often, and when we did, Emily's jealousy took center stage. My parents went back to their old methods because they couldn't decide whether to include me or control Emily's emotions. It quickly became evident that I was only living in Emily's reality once more. I felt bad for disturbing things, so I proposed that we resume our regular routine. I decided that accepting my position on the sidelines would make things simpler for everyone. However, our therapist disapproved of that notion, reminding us that the purpose of treatment was to disrupt these negative habits rather than to strengthen them. Even though it seemed like we were going nowhere, we persisted. The majority of our sessions were dominated by Emily's sentiments of envy and abandonment. Even in therapy, which was meant to benefit all of us, she continued to take center stage. Despite my frustration, I failed to find a solution. One session reached a breaking point when Emily accused my parents of loving and preferring me more. My parents went into a self-doubting, guilt-ridden spiral after the accusation. The progress we had been making was compromised as they rushed to reassure her. It was tiring to see the same patterns being repeated over and over. I started to question whether going on with therapy was really necessary. I was so exhausted. I was simply exhausted and no longer upset. I'm tired of attempting to articulate how I feel and of holding out hope that things will improve. I began withdrawing once more, both from the treatment sessions and from my family. I started to lose the tiny hope I'd been holding on to, the hope that perhaps things could be different. That change occurred within me. I came to terms with the fact that this was the way life would be. Therapy had become just another ritual in which I expressed my emotions, only for Emily's desires and sentiments to take precedence over mine. My parents couldn't come see me since they were too involved in Emily's life. I accepted that information as true. I had lost my anger. I had exerted every effort to draw their attention to me and help them comprehend what it was like to be ignored. However, it was obvious that they were set in their ways, and I was out of energy to challenge it. I started to completely stop going to therapy. What use was it to repeat the same things over and over again if nothing was going to change? My parents were aware of my increasing distance, but they were unsure of how to respond. They seemed to be only going through the motions when they tried to interact with me. Whether they inquired about my day or made awkward attempts to strike up a conversation over dinner, there was no genuine connection. My withdrawal was also observed by Emily. She had a mixed response. On the one hand, she was glad that she was once again the center of attention. There were still a lot of questions, on the one hand. She started questioning me about trivial topics, such as my after-school activities and the games I was playing. She didn't know how to connect, and to be honest, I didn't either by this point. We were both unable to overcome the hurdles that had been put in place by years of mistrust and misunderstanding. I began focusing on my studies and personal hobbies. I made friends, joined groups, and concentrated on things that had nothing to do with home. It was comforting to be surrounded by people who knew Emily yet recognized me for more than just her sibling. I came to understand that I didn't need my family's approval by spending more time at school and with friends. I could establish my own personality without having to worry for my sister's demands. One day, during a particularly difficult therapy session, everything came to a head. I had been listening in silence as the therapist brought up Emily's sentiments of envy and desertion once more. She was always the focus. I had made an effort to speak up earlier in the session, describing how it felt to be repeatedly ignored. However, the topic quickly returned to Emily's difficulties. I was used to it at this point, yet it seemed different that day. Perhaps it was the years of frustration building up, or maybe it was the understanding that I had had enough. I paused the session after taking a deep breath. I told them everything. I had the impression that my family was looking straight through me. How I had given up on the idea that things would be different. How Emily's needs always came first and birthdays, accomplishments, and little moments had become meaningless. I described how agonizing it was to watch them defend the necessity of the current situation and how I had finally realized that nothing would change. The room was quiet after I was done. My parents were surprised, as if they were unaware of how deeply I was hurting. The harm was already done, even though the therapist made an effort to steer the discussion in a more constructive direction. My parents defended themselves rather than owning up to the damage they had caused me. They discussed how difficult it was to balance everything, how important Emily's health was and how they were trying their hardest. Emily joined in, saying I was attempting to make her feel awful over something she couldn't control. When she was the one dealing with actual difficulties, she accused me of being selfish for seeking attention. I wasn't surprised by what she said, even though it hurt. The hidden lesson that my feelings were not as significant as hers was one I had heard before. The therapist made an effort to diffuse the situation, but the damage had already been done. That's when I knew nothing would change. My parents were unable to see past Emily's needs, and Emily was only able to see her own difficulties. I never really succeeded in making room for myself, so I was caught in the center. For me, that session was a turning moment. I made the decision to stop trying to make things better. I kept being caught between Emily's and my own demands after that. Now though, I was simply worn out. I had lost my anger. Peace was what I desired. The conflict was no longer interesting. I became progressively more reclusive during the following few weeks. I concentrated on my studies, looking for internships, college scholarships, and any opportunity to travel far from home and be independent at last. I started searching for distant colleges where I could start over without having to worry about the dynamics of my family. I craved distance, both physically and emotionally, even though I loved my family. I rejected my parents' suggestion that we consult a different therapist to get a different viewpoint. I had given up on attempting to fix anything that was too damaged. Despite their apparent disappointment, they didn't press the issue, either because they were growing weary of the never-ending battle or because they were starting to realize that some wounds couldn't be healed. However, Emily didn't appear to notice that I was withdrawing. She was once again the center of attention, and she was perfectly content with it. Every now and again she would inquire about my plans, but our discussions never progressed past the obvious. I didn't see a way to close the distance between us now that we had drifted apart. I became more and more preoccupied about my future. I applied to colleges, went to college campuses, and put myself into getting ready for life beyond high school. My grades improved, my friendships grew stronger, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making progress toward a personal goal. I was creating a life apart from Emily, my parents, and the never-ending cycle of letdown. In the end, I received acceptance to a college in a different state. I could travel home if necessary, but it was still distant enough for me to be independent. When I told my parents, they were pleased for me, but I also felt sad. They must have seen that this was my method of bidding farewell to the family dynamics that had continuously molded me. They made no effort to persuade me to remain nearer to home. Rather, they only sent me their best wishes and said they would come see me when they could. I felt as though a burden had been removed when I left home. The independence that came with living alone thrilled me. I moved into a tiny dorm room after packing my belongings. The initial weeks were peculiar. The silence and the lack of Emily's incessant demands were unfamiliar to me. However, I quickly adapted to my new existence. I joined groups, made new friends, and found that I liked having my own identity. I was able to be myself for the first time in years, not the forgotten sibling, not an afterthought, just me. It was freeing. I discovered that I didn't miss home as much as I had anticipated as the months went by. Even though I continued to communicate with my parents, the distance gave me the freedom to unwind and discover my identity without having to worry about family responsibilities. I became aware that the resentment I had harbored for so long was beginning to lessen when we spent time apart. I no longer had animosity toward Emily, and I was no longer upset with my parents. Even though I hadn't always appreciated their best efforts, I now realized that they had done the best they could. Learning to let go of my expectations brought me serenity. Life in college was enjoyable. I was surrounded by individuals who noticed me, paid attention to me, and gave me a sense of acceptance. These close companions turned into family. We commemorated accomplishments, birthdays, and even the minor triumphs that my family had frequently disregarded. I was no longer only an afterthought for the first time. Being a part of something was an incredible feeling. Even though I had discovered a new sense of belonging, I still missed my family. I stayed in touch, but we only had surface-level interactions. The deeper problems that had afflicted us for so long were never explored. Reopening old wounds was something I wasn't sure I was ready for. So, liberated from the shadow of my past, I carried on living my life and making it genuinely mine. It wasn't flawless, but it was sufficient. I had been looking for a place where I could just be myself all my life. I had finally located that location. With time, the distance between my family and I became more about emotional isolation than it was about geographic distance. I was finally starting my own life without the burden of my family's past. I wasn't just existing at college, I was thriving. For the first time, I felt appreciated and seen for who I was, not only for what other people at home had classified me as, and I made friends who truly liked me. I would still occasionally contact home, mostly out of duty, but those conversations always felt pointless. My parents would nod courteously when I told them about my friends or school, but it was always obvious that Emily was still very important to them emotionally. As soon as I brought up her name, the topic of conversation would go back to her most recent health information, difficulties she was facing, and how she was handling everything. When it felt that my life was merely a footnote in their world, it was hard to stay involved in such discussions. I couldn't fully give up on the possibility that things would change in the future though. I was depressed even though I had long since moved on from the grudge. There was still a secret longing for a family that would embrace me the way they did Emily. My parents would simply give me a quick phone call or a fast text message to mark milestones, holidays, and birthdays. I had given up on expecting anything more by that point. I rejoiced with my pals, who had become my real family. They were the ones who made me feel important, who remembered my birthday, and who were there for me when I needed them. During my last year of college, I made the decision to spend Christmas at home 1 year. Since I hadn't been there in a long time, I reasoned that perhaps enough time had gone by for things to feel different. Perhaps I had changed and matured enough to manage the dynamics that had before overwhelmed me. The house was the same when I got there, yet something felt different. Maybe I was the difference. Perhaps the area that had made me feel so small was now too small for me. My parents' cordial welcome gave me a fleeting optimism that this visit would be unique. However, the old patterns quickly reappeared. Once more, Emily was at the center of every discussion, her needs, her challenges, her accomplishments. I listened politely, but as the days passed, I noticed that I was emotionally withdrawing and reverting to the corner I had occupied for so long. It seemed as though I had never been gone. Christmas morning was the decisive moment. My folks hadn't remembered to buy me anything. There was nothing for me as we sat around the tree exchanging gifts, no name-branded item, no sign of appreciation. I saw Emily's happiness light up the room as she opened her presents. My parents valued her so highly that they were oblivious to my silent existence. My life had been fashioned by years of overlooked milestones, forgotten birthdays, and subtle neglect, all of which were brought back to me in that moment. This time, however, I experienced acceptance rather than rage or sadness. I had finally come to the point where I didn't require their approval or affirmation. I didn't need them to congratulate me because I had learned to do it on my own. I silently packed my belongings that night and departed early the next morning. There was no conflict, no spectacular departure. I was aware that I had at last reconciled with my childhood family. Knowing they wouldn't change, I just turned away. However, I realized that I no longer required their space. In a family that didn't know how to provide for me, I had spent years trying to find a place for myself. In the world I had created for myself, I had discovered that place somewhere. Life continued. I got a job in a distant place after graduating with honors from college. It was everything I had ever wanted. A new beginning, a clean slate, unencumbered by my family's past, and the freedom to become who I truly wanted to be. For the first time, I felt genuinely pleased with what I had achieved, and my friends joined me in celebrating by throwing a party in my honor. I became acutely aware that my happiness was independent of my family after spending time apart from them. We never delved into the underlying concerns that had created our relationship. Instead, our interactions remained superficial when I periodically visited home. And that was all right. I had given up attempting to alter the fact that Emily would always come first for my parents. As the years passed, my life kept changing in unforeseen ways. I created a life that felt completely unique, surrounded myself with people who appreciated me, and got a job I enjoyed. I had discovered how to be happy without looking to my parents for attention or praise. I still occasionally think about my family, including Emily and her life to this day, as well as my parents, who still focus on her. I'm curious whether they ever consider me. If they ever consider what they missed or how things ended. I don't think about it though. I've moved on and accepted that things will always be difficult in my connection with them. In my opinion, a family is made up of everyone who supports you, accepts you for who you are, and loves you without conditions, not only your biological relatives. With more love and support than I ever imagined, my friends have grown to be like family. Though I've learned to love myself enough to let go of the desire for their approval, I will always adore my parents. The fact that I've created a happy life is ultimately what counts. I am incredibly thankful for the lessons I have learned, the strength I have acquired, and the person I have become as I sit here now and think back on the path that has led me to this point. I never lost myself, even though my family may have forgotten me in many ways. And that's what matters most of all, I've come to realize. I reluctantly agreed to an open marriage with my wife. When I fell in love with a coworker, my ex lost control and tried to ruin everything. I, 47, have been married to Lisa, 42, for 17 years, however we only lived together for roughly 7 years. A decade ago, I discovered Lisa cheating on me, and she admitted that she had fallen out of love and desired an open marriage. We have 2 children. The older was a toddler and the younger was still a baby when this occurred. It was heartbreaking to me. She stated that having back-to-back pregnancies had a negative impact on her physical and emotional health, and she wished to freshen up. Unfortunately, her method of relaxation was to bring various men into bed. Divorce was complicated at that stage, with 2 small children and a meager income. I decided to let her live her life as I relocated upstairs in our duplex home. We became co-parents for our children. It wasn't as hunky-dory as it seems. We split up with a lot of hatred and name-calling, largely from me since she cheated. But soon, we got caught up in work and life and I moved on and became more relaxed. A few months ago, I met Kathy, 35F at work. She's my junior, and we hit it off immediately. Bonding with her felt more natural than anything I'd experienced in a long time. It wasn't a romantic connection at first. We connected as understanding co-workers and spent time together outside of work, still simply as friends. We made out last month and I had a unique feeling for her. She has been crashing at my apartment on a regular basis since then, which technically affects my wife. Lisa is still my wife and we are still married. Lisa has been acting strangely these days. Kathy hangs out with me and attempts to command authority like a wife. I had to remind her that we are separated, and I can live my life as she has for years. It is difficult to express what she has been doing, but I will try. Kathy and I were eating dinner one evening in my kitchen. Lisa arrived and asked, "Can I join you guys?" It became an extremely awkward time for both of us. Kathy and I gazed at each other, surprised. Lisa sat down with her dish without waiting for a response. We ate supper like strangers, smiling politely despite Lisa's forced chat. Our supper was ruined, but I gave Lisa the benefit of the doubt, believing she was simply trying to fit in. Then there was another incident in which she was bossy, attempting to impose her rights as a wife. Kathy and I were upstairs watching a movie when Lisa barged in and requested me to join her. When I questioned what was wrong, she answered, "Your children need you. The younger one needs your assistance with a scientific project." I was surprised since we had divided the schoolwork. I help the older child, and she takes care of the smaller. I informed her that I had already done my part for our eldest kid and that this was now her responsibility. She became enraged and exclaimed, "Is this kid not yours? Instead of assisting him, you're here lurking." This resulted in a full-blown confrontation between Lisa and me. Kathy, feeling embarrassed, excused herself and left. Kathy told me after that episode that she would no longer hang out at my apartment, though we continue to meet at hers. But why should I sacrifice my life when I've never touched hers? She's been living her life her way, bringing whatever mail she wants into the house. And I've always looked the other way. Lisa is purposely attempting to break the link I've formed with someone. I addressed Lisa the other day, and she replied she wasn't worried by my close relationship with Kathy. She refused to accept her actions, claiming I was overthinking. I informed her that if she continued to intervene in my life, I would consider getting divorced. She had tears in her eyes and apologized for disturbing us. She was only worried about our son's unfinished assignment and was preoccupied with her work, so she asked me for assistance. I claimed it wasn't a call for help, it was nothing short of gaslighting. She then contacted Kathy, apologized and invited her to come over. Kathy accepted the apologies but set boundaries, explaining that she preferred to meet me at her home. I am currently in a difficult situation. I want to get rid of Lisa, but I'm worried she'll destroy my growing connection with Kathy. I'm thinking of obtaining a divorce. The only reason I didn't file for divorce back then was that I didn't want my children to have to pick between their mother and father. Now I'm contemplating if I should go forward with it and prioritize myself over everyone else, including my children. Should I wait a few years for my children to grow up before making a move? I'm not sure Kathy will wait for me till then. Oh, I'm still upset with Lisa over her decision to open the marriage. I'm also upset with myself for agreeing with her and not pushing back enough. Edit. Apologies for all of the jargon and missing facts, particularly on Lisa's adultery and our separation dynamics. People say it's tough to give counsel without clarity, so here it is. It'll be long, so skip it if you don't want to learn about the past. This was roughly 10 years ago, so I may have missed a few specifics. Lisa began acting up 4 months after our younger kid was born. She wouldn't let me get close and said she wasn't ready for sex. Pregnancy and breastfeeding had made her wary of closeness. I supported her decision, but we were slipping apart emotionally. I recommended we go to couples therapy, but she dismissed it, saying it was simply her postpartum phase and she'd recover shortly. It took almost a year before I lost patience and addressed her, stating that we needed to address the elephant in the room. She either attended therapy with me or gave me the truth about what was wrong. She gaslighted me, accusing me of being insensitive and other nonsense, but I refused to let it go this time and probed for the truth. I snooped through her phone but found nothing definite because she had deleted the majority of the chats and emails. I'm not sure how I got the clue, but one day she mentioned she was going shopping with her pals. I followed her automobile and discovered her infidelity. She was sleeping with a young college student. I knocked rather than barged into his residence. Lisa was on the couch in her lingerie, trying to cover herself, when a shirtless guy responded. I grabbed the guy by the neck and was ready to strike him when Lisa interfered, pleading with me to leave him alone. She cried, saying it wasn't his fault. He was only one of the guys she was hooking up with. It blew my mind. What the heck, one of the guys? She admitted to hooking up with several guys. The guy standing in front of me had no idea what was going on, or that she was married with children. We returned home, and I did everything any man in my position would do. No, I don't hit. I'm not a violent man. I contacted her parents and confessed the facts in front of everyone. I insisted on the divorce. I even engaged a lawyer and discussed the case, but as things went, the lawyer revealed the truth, which shook me. There was no genuine benefit for me, only loss. Because the kids were so young, they'd require their mother. At most, I could gain joint custody, but Lisa would have to allow me to meet with them and dictate the terms. Yes, I could take her to court if she didn't follow the court order. But how often does a regular man want to become engaged in legal battles? We live in a no-fault state, so there is no moral policing for her. I still have to pay alimony, and child support is required. So basically, I handle all of the tasks of a father, but I rely on Lisa to spend time with my children. Lisa, on the other hand, was opposed divorce. She proposed that rather than divorcing, we open our marriage and return to each other whenever we wanted. I knew I never wanted her back, but divorce was too expensive at the time. The only practical choice was to separate and live as housemates and co-parents with our children. So, we did it. Though she calls it an open marriage or whatever she wants, I consider it a failed strategy, and we have parted. Lisa has been with several partners over the last 10 years. Though she claims she had no significant relationships with any of them, I believe she had at least 3 sexual partners. They visited our house, and she went trekking and on vacation with them. It was difficult for me to see her bringing different guys into our home, first her adultery, then her multiple partners in our bedroom. We own a duplex house. I move the guest bedroom upstairs. The stairs leading to it are accessible through the back door. We bought the property from an Asian couple who built it so their grown-up son could live upstairs in peace. Unfortunately, the son moved out, and the couple sold it to us since it was too big for them. The main entry to the house leads into a living room with a large closed kitchen, a dining area, a master bedroom, and a pantry that we converted into our children's room. Upstairs, there is a guest room the same size as the master bedroom, and the rest of the space is dedicated to a huge library area for reading and hosting parties. That space leads to the roof of the home, which has a little patio. Since I was moved upstairs, I could see much of what was going on downstairs. I hoped I could close my eyes, but for my children's sake, I remained attentive. I initially joined the dating scene, but after a few months, it felt hollow and useless. I discontinued it and concentrated on other important matters. I joined a badminton club to improve my athletic body. I had been a sports fan in college, so I returned to playing field games on weekends. I also joined a hiking club that plans solo hikes every 2 months. You cannot bring a friend, spouse, or someone you know. You hike alone, and there are others who do as well. It was tremendous fun. I did that for 2 years straight and now only do it twice a year. I've had a few hookups over the last 10 years, but no emotional affairs or long-term relationships. I didn't feel connected to anyone else. Kathy's situation is different. I feel good around her. She's the woman I believe I can give love another chance with. But now, Lisa, the devil of my life, has returned to hunt me down. The scenario remains the same. Kathy refuses to come to my apartment. I'm concerned she'll withdraw herself from me, and I don't want to lose her. The scenario forces me to choose between Kathy and my children, and I'm having difficulty making a decision. Update 1. Hello everyone. Thank you for all your suggestions and remarks. I appreciate everything, good and terrible. I sought therapy, which greatly aided me in determining my focus point and what I want out of life at this time. As several of you mentioned, the children are nearing their teen years, so it will only be a matter of a few years before they leave to lead their own lives. It makes no sense to pass up my chance to be happy with Kathy. I had an open discussion with Kathy. I told her about my feelings. I told her I wanted to be with her, and if she felt the same way we could work things out. She claims she feels the same way but is hesitant due to my family dynamics. She simply does not feel comfortable around my legal wife. She is fine with the youngsters surrounding me, however. I said I could figure this out. I'm going to move out and the kids can choose where they want to live. They are mature enough to make that choice, and they can alternate between mom and dad's. Kathy agreed with the plan. My therapist proposed counseling for the children, in which they might be informed of our marital status in an age-appropriate way. Lisa flipped out when I informed her about the counseling. She stated I was being selfish and damaging our children's life by getting serious with Kathy, and that I should put my family first over my own selfish goals. I lost my cool at that. I asked, "Really, Lisa? Are you the one advocating family values and morality? What happened to your ethics while you were getting knocked up by various men when your children were still breastfeeding and rolling in their cribs?" I asked her to back off and brought the children to the counselor. It was useful. The children responded well and appreciated that we had banded together for their cause. They also agreed that I deserved to be happy for the rest of my life. I informed Lisa that I would be filing for divorce. She pretended to be surprised and began sobbing. She stated, "I thought we decided never to divorce and to be together throughout. Now that you have found this woman, you are leaving your family to be with her. I've also met a lot of men who wanted to marry me, but I never gave up my married life for them." I responded, "Stop trying to guilt trip me. This is not helping. Cut the bullshit and sign the paperwork. I'll be paying for the children's education until college and you can retain the house and the car. This will be your alimony. I will be moving out. I am prioritizing my pleasure over money because I can now afford it. Back then I couldn't." She cried and tried everything she could to convince me out of get divorced. She stated I could move out and live with Kathy while still married to her. I said, "I adore Kathy and do not want her to be dubbed my mistress. I know no one calls her that, but you would. You can go to any length to humiliate others. The paperwork should arrive any day soon. I'm moving in with Kathy next month. I am waiting for my children's annual tests to be completed. I'll be taking them on a trip and then moving out. I'll feel relieved when everything is settled. Update 2. I'm telling you, this woman is a true piece of work. As I said in my previous report, I was on holiday with the children. This woman seized the opportunity to carry out her nasty scheme. Lisa wept her way to Kathy, telling her to back off. She informed her that she was breaking up our family and that our children would suffer as a result. Lisa attempted to guilt Kathy, but when Kathy refused, Lisa said that I wasn't serious about her and that she was simply a fling for me. Lisa is a cunning, ruthless woman. She knows precisely how to play her cards. She knew I was in a low network zone with the kids, so she promised not to call me, and she didn't. If Kathy had been any other woman, she would have freaked out at the fling phrase. But she remained calm and waited for my return. She had my hotel number but did not bother me. That's what I admire about her. She's a confident woman despite my complicated situation. When I arrived home and learned of Lisa's spiteful move, I marched up to her door and yelled at her. I should have done this sooner to get the garbage out of her mind. Her entitled behavior has gone too far, and no one will tolerate it any longer. I have moved out of my house. My children have also decided to stay with me, but we do not have a spare room, therefore I'm looking for a larger property to accommodate them. Until then, kids are remaining with their mother. When I was moving out, Lisa performed a variety of tantrums, ranging from guilt-tripping to ranting, gaslighting to sobbing and pleading for another opportunity. She asked me to give our relationship one more chance. I told her that our relationship had ended 10 years ago. We were only housemates and co-parents. The truth is, I've moved on from loving her. She is nothing to me. I love Kathy and want to spend the rest of my life with her. When Lisa received the divorce papers, she tore them up. My lawyer had to issue her a letter threatening to sue her for destroying a legal document. Only then did she calm down and consent to sign them. The divorce proceedings are ongoing. I haven't followed up on my soon-to-be ex-wife since then. I went to pick up my children twice but did not enter the home. Yes, several of you inquired about my children's ages. They are now 11 and 13, mature enough to understand the divorce and separation. Update 3. I am pleased to inform you that my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBX, is now officially my ex-wife. The main point of this update is that the divorce is finalized and my children have moved in with me. They will visit their mother every 2 weeks or whenever they wish. The last month has been hectic, renting a house and relocating belongings. We didn't tell Lisa about the kids moving in with me until I rented a new house. We all knew she'd be upset, so we decided to wait as long as possible before telling her. The kids advised packing their bags and sneaking off with me when Lisa wasn't looking, but I chose to handle things legally. I did not want to get into another argument with that woman. According to our divorce agreement, we must give each other 3 days' notice if we intend to take the children for more than 2 days. So I returned home and informed Lisa that the children wanted to live with me and that I would pick them up in 3 days. As expected, she freaked out. Fortunately for us, she did not become violent, breaking things and all, which would have made things easier for us. Instead, she took the emotional way. She held the children, cried, apologized for everything, and begged them not to leave her. She did her best to emotionally manipulate them into staying with her. She was even successful with the younger child, who stated that he wanted to stay with Mama. Kathy had warned me that circumstances like these may occur, so I was expecting a last-minute change of heart. When my younger kid called, I told him, "Cool, Dad loves you no matter what." But my oldest son was strong in his choice to move out, so I answered, "Sure, I'll pick you up." I'm not sure what happened in the meantime, but when I went to pick him up, both boys were prepared with their luggage. I hugged both of them and led them away. I didn't inquire as to what had occurred. It was already upsetting enough for them, and I didn't want to further the situation. Kathy and I are attempting to make them feel at ease in our new home. We're involving them in the process of setting up their rooms, ensuring that everything matches their preferences. I expected Lisa to make one more effort to stop the children from leaving the house, but she had already given up. She simply sat there, crying and screaming. She hugged the boys firmly, apologized for her actions, and assured them that she loved them. She stated they were welcome to return to Mama's whenever they pleased. Before I departed, she asked if I had time for coffee. Her appeal sounded innocent and sincere, so I accepted. Her tone conveyed regret and she apologized. This time it did not sound false. She confessed, "I was delusional all along, thinking you would never leave me. When Kathy entered your life, I did not see her as a threat. I assumed she was simply one of those flings that will die out in a month. I believe I took you for granted because of the safety you gave for me and the kids, despite everything I did to you. I didn't realize I was mean and narcissistic until it was too late. I simply smiled and hid my emotions. I rose up to leave and she approached to hug me. I hugged her back. This was our first hug in 10 years. I can't really absorb how I felt about it, and I can't describe how I feel today following our final talk. I'm not pleased or sad, just numb. That's how it is. My life has changed dramatically during the previous 6 to 7 months. I suppose it will take time for me to process everything. Thank you all for your help, you've been the best. If anything changes from here, I may update the thread. My wife's affair was exposed by her own parents, now they want to disown her and leave me their $2 million inheritance. Should I accept it? My wife, Nicole, 27F, and I, 29M, had been married for a year before I filed for divorce after discovering she was cheating on me with one of her coworkers. Interestingly, it was my in-laws that revealed the affair to me and advised me to file for divorce as soon as possible. Nicole is the sole child of her rich parents, who run a large pharmaceutical firm. Nicole and I met on a dating service around 3 years ago and hit it off on our first date. After 1 year of living together, I proposed, and we married shortly thereafter. Her parents, whom I'll call Frank and Leah, were always quite nice and seemed to like me. Nicole always joked that I was the son they never had, and it truly seemed that way. They treated me like family from the moment I met them. They were warm, friendly, and grounded despite their affluence, which I greatly respected. I grew up in an emotionally unstable home. My parents did not love each other, but stayed together for my sake, resulting in regular arguments. Neither were affectionate, and while we are still in touch, family dinners feel more like chores. But Nicole's family was different. They felt like my own people, and I instantly relaxed around them. While I knew they liked me, I never dreamed they would support me over their daughter. My difficulty now is that Frank and Leah want to make me the successor to their inheritance as a result of Nicole's adultery. They want to compensate for what happened by paying me $2 million, while disowning Nicole in the process. I'm not sure if I should accept it because, in the end, the money is rightfully Nicole's, and I'm only being offered it because of her betrayal. Nicole is outraged at the scenario, and I am emotionally heartbroken. I had a lawyer look over everything, and it's a substantial sum of money that I would be taking away from Nicole if I accepted their offer. Despite how hurt I feel, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate thing to do. I obviously want the money, but I am conflicted. Nicole and I have always had a smooth and loving connection. We had little fights, as any couple would, but we worked them out. So when my in-laws invited me over to their house to talk about something important, I had no idea they'd reveal Nicole's infidelity. Nicole works for her father's company and is in charge of recruitment. Because it was a family business, they could easily keep an eye on her and observed she was spending a lot of time with one of the new hires. What made it even more horrible was that the man she was having an affair with was much younger than her. He had recently graduated from college and he was just 21. It was legal, but it seemed unusual that Nicole, although being happily married, felt compelled to pursue love outside of our marriage. Her parents had seen the growing intimacy between the two of them and even asked Nicole about it to be sure. She assured them that they were just close friends and that nothing untoward was happening. This worried her parents, not only because it would have an impact on our marriage, but also because it could lead to legal action. Nicole was in a higher position than the guy she was associated with, and if things went wrong, he could use it against the company and sue them. Despite her parents' persistent questions about their relationship, Nicole argued that it was entirely professional and that there was nothing else to it. Unfortunately, her parents found it difficult to trust her. Despite their cautions, Nicole continued to see him outside of work. They initially refused to notify me because they did not believe it was their responsibility. It was plausible that this was a harmless friendship. However, things escalated, prompting her parents to intercede. They hired a private detective to keep tabs on Nicole. They had no money issues and were able to hire a professional for the work. The detective discovered that Nicole was frequently visiting the other person after work hours. She would tell me she was with friends or at work, and I believed her, but her parents later disclosed that this was not the truth. Every day, once her workday finished, she would go over to his house and spend a few hours before returning home. We all knew that if she was lying to me, something was wrong. When I found out, I was devastated. I sincerely loved Nicole, and a part of me still does, But finding that she had been cheating and lying for months devastated me. This news came about a week and a half ago, and I still remember how upset I was during the meeting with my in-laws. They too were very saddened when they told me the truth, knowing Nicole would never confess. They believed it was best for them to come forward. Nicole had no notion her parents knew the truth. I was the first one they informed. I cried down in front of them, but they consoled me as if I were their own kid. They reassured me that it was not my fault and that they had seen how effectively I handled Nicole. This was completely her doing. She didn't appreciate the love she received from her parents and me and tossed it all away for someone she'd only known for a year. I stayed at their house that night because I couldn't bring myself to go home and confront Nicole. They kindly let me spend the night, and I cried the whole time. I was rattled up and unsure of what to do next. Logically, I understood the next step was to file for divorce, but my heart wasn't ready to give up on her just yet. The following morning, I decided to return home before Nicole went to work. I hadn't returned any of her calls or texts the night before, so she was astonished when I walked up just as she was ready to leave. I was plainly in horrible shape and she was concerned. I sat her down and asked her about the affair, as it was the most pressing issue on my mind. She hesitated and attempted to dispute it at first, but then I showed her the photos her parents had given me, shots showing her car parked outside her coworker's house on the night she had told me she was working late. She tried to say they were just pals hanging around, but there was no reason for her to lie. Eventually, she was forced to reveal the truth. She had been cheating on me. I broke down as soon as she admitted. This time it was worse than previously since, when it was only her parents informing me, I still hoped it was a misunderstanding. Hearing that from Nicole herself shattered any denial I had. I was hysterical, and while I don't remember all I said, I do recall there was a lot of screaming and shouting. Nicole began to cry, confessing that she had been silly and lost sight of what was important since she had grown bored in our marriage. She stated that the affair meant little to her and that she never expected me to find out. It simply made matters worse. If it didn't mean anything, she had no reason to do it. I was shocked to learn that she had wrecked our marriage because she was bored. I recall yelling at her about how much I trusted her, how I had always been there for her, and how she had given it all up for someone she hardly knew. I yelled until she collapsed into a pool of tears. At one point, things became so severe that she collapsed on the floor, wailing with her head in her hands, while I screamed. It was a disaster, and just thinking about it makes me uneasy. Nothing about it seemed normal. When the ordeal ended, I informed her I was done and asked her to leave the house. She begged with me, claiming she would cease things with the other guy immediately and wanted another chance at our marriage. I informed her that as long as she was around, all I could think about was her affair. I needed time to comprehend things, which meant she needed to leave. More disagreements ensued, with her claiming that we could work things out and that remaining together was the proper thing to do. At the time, I was still battling to understand that she had cheated on me. The decision to work things out or leave her was secondary. First, I wanted to digest what had happened, something I couldn't do with her around. I didn't want to breathe the same air as her because she repulsed and irritated me so much. However, she refused to leave, which infuriated me to the point that I informed her I would leave instead. I couldn't take being near her anymore. She was still unhappy and told me I couldn't go because she wanted to work things out and stay married. She claimed it was all a mistake and I couldn't leave her for something like this. I didn't even respond, just left. I didn't bother packing anything and instead began driving aimlessly, unsure where to go. I didn't realize I'd have to stay there overnight until I ran out of gas. I drove to the nearest motel and have stayed there ever since. Despite my best efforts to forgive and forget what Nicole did, our relationship has not improved. I simply can't. So last week, after 3 days of deliberation, I filed for divorce. I hadn't spoken to Nicole since leaving the house, despite her attempts to contact me. The reality is, I have nothing else to say to her since what she did is something I can never forgive or forget. However, my in-laws have been in close communication with me, checking in on me on a daily basis to ensure my well-being. I've been talking to them since when I asked my own parents for aid. They weren't very helpful. They gave non-specific suggestions, such as do what feels right, which was neither comfortable nor useful. Feeling emotionally separated from my parents, I confided in my in-laws. I haven't told my pals yet, but I do need emotional support, which is why I've stayed close to them. Some people may find it unusual, but I'm extremely close to them and don't believe it's wrong. Nicole began messaging me more frequently after being served with the divorce papers, but I have yet to read any of her texts. I silenced her alerts so they wouldn't annoy me, but that doesn't mean I'd moved on. Everything still hurts. To make matters worse, I am also struggling at work. I had to take an unexplained leave of absence since I was unable to commute from the hotel, which is in the middle of nowhere. I am almost out of paid leave, and my employer recently called me to inform me that if I do not return to work soon, I will be terminated. This added to my worry because I have huge bills coming up. Divorce is expensive and I'll need to start looking for a new home to live. I had been discussing all of this with my in-laws in conversation, expecting little support. But they shocked me. They told me that Nicole had put me in this situation, and they would rectify it. I had no idea what they were going to do, but a few hours later, they requested me to come to their house right away. Nicole was present and they wanted us to sort things out, not necessarily about the divorce, but at least about who would reside in the house. They proposed Nicole stay with them, while I required the house to keep my work. I was hesitant to go because I did not want to confront Nicole, but my in-laws persuaded me, and I eventually accepted. When I arrived at their house, I was frightened to meet Nicole after such a long time, but I tried not to let it show. For the first several minutes, we avoided looking at each other. We didn't notice each other's existence until my in-laws began conversing. My in-laws offered that I take over the house so Nicole could live with them, which made sense given that they all worked in the same place. Losing the house would be a significant issue for me because it would mean losing my work without a solid place to live. Then, something unexpected occurred. Nicole began protesting that she did not see why she had to be the one to make such sacrifices. She said it was my fault we were divorcing and informed her parents that they, as her parents, should be on her side rather than mine. She accused them of supporting a cheater, which baffled us all. We stared at her, waiting for her to clarify what she was saying. Her tone was furious and full of conviction, and I began to believe she might have something to say that made sense. Unfortunately, she began spewing total rubbish, and I immediately knew she was just trying to make me look terrible in front of her parents so they wouldn't support me again. Nicole had no idea her parents had told me about the affair, so she probably assumed I had hired an investigator to collect those images myself. Nicole, completely oblivious of her parents' involvement, began fabricating a story, alleging that I was having an affair with a mutual friend. She stated she had noticed how cozy the two of us were whenever we hung together, and she even supplied manipulated images to make it appear as if I was romantically involved with my friend. Nicole stated that her own affair occurred because she was hurt after discovering my alleged adultery, and that she only went out with her co-worker as a form of revenge. She explained to her parents that now that everything was out in the open, she expected them to kick me out of the house and cut relations with me. She insisted that they discontinue their friendship with me because she was convinced I had duped them into thinking I was the victim. Nicole also accused me of planning the meeting with her parents in order to portray myself as innocent and place all of the responsibility on her. At that point, I knew Nicole had made a serious mistake. She had just dug herself a hole with her lies, hoping to expose me and regain her parents' support. Given the circumstances, that was an extremely poor decision. Sure enough, her mother began ranting at her almost immediately, claiming she couldn't believe Nicole believed they'd fall for her falsehoods and badly altered images. Nicole was visibly moved by her mother's reaction, as she had clearly not expected it. Her parents indicated that they had expected her to be honest after being caught, but she had instead become a lying cheater. They even apologized, claiming that they had failed to raise her correctly if she had become this person. Then came the big reveal. My in-laws revealed to Nicole that they had informed me about her affair and handed me the images. There was no point in lying anymore because everyone knew the truth. Nicole's expression at that moment was priceless. A massive battle erupted, which was unavoidable. Nicole felt betrayed and despised the fact that her parents had always treated me as if I were their own son while willing to sell off their own daughter for my sake. Her parents, understandably outraged, called her stupid for not realizing sooner that they were the ones who informed me about the affair. After all, they had asked her about it several times, asking if she had a relationship with her coworker, which she had continuously denied. Nicole said that it had crossed her mind that her parents might have notified me, but she disregarded the possibility, feeling that as her parents, they would show her loyalty regardless of what she did. The dispute lasted a bit before Nicole rushed out, claiming she didn't want to speak to any of us anymore. She stormed out, plainly agitated because she'd had enough of everyone. I felt sorry for her because I could imagine how difficult it must be not to have your own parents on your side. After things had settled down, my in-laws informed me that they had made up their minds. They intended to modify their will and make me the sole successor to their inheritance, believing Nicole did not deserve it and that I was a better choice. It was a big decision, and I was hesitant to accept such a significant quantity of money knowing that it would essentially be stolen from Nicole. I told them I needed some time to think it over because it was a huge deal and I couldn't just agree without thinking about the repercussions. I wanted to make sure I was making the proper decision, so I requested time, and they obliged. They promised me that I would have plenty of time to make my decision. It's been a few days, and I'm still unclear whether it's the moral and ethical thing to do. While Nicole did break our marriage by infidelity, the amount I would inherit from her is significant, and I am not sure if it is fair. I've been thinking about it and am at a loss. That is why I am here. To determine whether it is okay for me to accept my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife's $2 million inheritance. Update 1. Thank you for your helpful feedback and support. I'm doing well emotionally, thanks to God. I've also talked to my friends about it, and they believe I should accept the money. After all, Nicole messed up, and if her parents want to make up by leaving me the money, I should let them. My buddies reminded me that Nicole not only cheated, but she also used false images to make it appear as if I was the one cheating. Her parents might have believed her if they hadn't already learned the truth. Nicole was ready to go to such efforts to avoid culpability, so I have no need to feel terrible about accepting the inheritance. I have made up my mind that I will not reject it. Nicole didn't care about my sentiments when she was out there destroying our marriage for a guy she barely knew. If she is going to be angry with anyone, it should be her parents, not me. Update 2. Today, I contacted my in-laws and informed them that I was willing to accept their offer. They were overjoyed and expressed gratitude for the opportunity to make things right following Nicole's actions. They informed me that Nicole had ceased contact with them and blocked them on all platforms following our argument at their place. She had also submitted her 2-week notice and quit her work, as had her affair partner. I was shocked. I knew Nicole enjoyed her profession, and I suspected her father was grooming her to take over when he retired. Now he must find someone else. Nicole is clearly eager to give up everything because she refuses to accept responsibility for her own acts. My father-in-law's voice seemed disappointed. Despite Nicole's mistakes, she remains their daughter and only child. It fascinated me that my in-laws emphasized doing the right thing over catering to their daughter's desires, which very few parents would do. I attempted to console them, but words weren't enough, so I decided to go see them tomorrow and spend some time with them. I know they must be lonely and hurt. Update 3. I've been staying in a motel for a few weeks now, after leaving my residence. Unfortunately, I was dismissed from my work, but the good news is that my father-in-law spoke with a friend and found me a far better job at his buddy's company. So I guess it's all okay in the end. The divorce proceedings have begun, and Nicole and I are pretty tense whenever we meet with the mediator. It's difficult for me to ignore her, but I need to. Nicole has already started dating and moved in with the other guy, which I know for a fact. I'm not shocked, but I am rather disappointed. I expected her to take longer to move on from me given how long we had been together. But it plainly didn't mean much to her, and I'm now trying to make sure it doesn't mean anything to me either. However, things with my in-laws are going well. We no longer speak to Nicole, nor does she speak to us. We try not to bring her up because it's a delicate subject for all of us. It's sad, but at least we're a family now. My in-laws haven't amended their will yet, but they intend to do so when the divorce is finalized, and they'll make sure Nicole isn't aware until after they're gone. We try to meet up frequently because we know we're all going through the same thing and can help each other. I hope it improves over time, and maybe someday it will.